Hello, welcome to In Studio. I'm in Butterfield. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a caricature self-portrait. In order to create a caricature portrait similar to the one that you can see on screen at the moment, we're going to need to take two images. One is a straight-on view to the camera, the other is a profile view. First thing to note about this kind of portrait is it actually works an awful lot better if the subject is wearing a t-shirt rather than a collared shirt. So, first things first, let's change the shirt. Shirt changed. Now let's talk about the lighting setup that we're going to use for this portrait. It's a 3-light setup. We have the key light or main light at the front, a large softbox. That's going to provide the main illumination of me as the subject. Behind me are 2 background lights, and their job is to throw the background out to pure white. It's a lot easier in post-production for this particular caricature effect if the background is pure white. So I'm going to use 2 lights for that. Right, let's take some light readings. I'm going to use my trusty Sekonic light meter and a trigger to trigger it. Hold the light under my chin, pointing towards the light I'm going to read. And we get a reading. At the moment it's F8, about F10 actually, because the way this meter reads is it gives the full stop value, F8, and then has a little dial which indicates the tenths of a stop. And looking at that, that's about a stop and 2/3, which is going to be about F10. Now that's probably okay for what I want. I normally in the studio aim for F8, so I'm going to turn the light down just a little bit and take that reading again. So here we go. This time exactly F8. Now let's turn on the background lights, and to blow the background out to pure white, we want to get those lights, the background reading, to be 1.5 to 2 stops over the foreground light. So foreground light is F8, 1 stop over that is F11, 2 stops is F16, so I'm looking somewhere in between there for a suitable light reading, which would be about F13, that sort of order would do quite nicely. So let's turn the lights on. Now to take a light reading for the background light, we point the light meter actually at the light, at the wall behind. So point it at the wall, have a look at the reading, and it's exactly F16. So I'm going to just turn them down very slightly, and that's perhaps just a little bit high. I like to be just under 2 stops. And some photographers will say exactly 2 stops. I like to be just a little bit under, about 1.5 stops. So let's turn these down a little. And let's take that reading again. And there, that's F11 and 2/3, so that's quite adequate for what we want. That will blow the background out to pure white quite nicely. So now let's talk about camera settings. As always in the studio, the camera is set to manual, 125th of a second, standard shutter speed to use in the studio. Aperture will be set to F8 because that's what I've just metered the main light to be. I'm using Yongnuo 603 triggers. I'm not sure whether that's the correct way to pronounce the manufacturer's name. The spelling of it will be across the bottom of the screen now. But I pronounce it Yongnuo. I have heard it pronounced other ways, but nobody seems to really know, I presume, other than the manufacturer. I use these triggers when I'm doing self-portraits. One of the great advantages of them is that you can actually use them as remote triggers as well as a means of triggering your studio lights. So I use 3 triggers for this setup. The one I hold in my hand, which I can use to fire the camera. One on the camera, which receives the signal, triggers the camera. It also then sends a signal through to the studio lights and causes them to fire. So 3 triggers on there in all. Now, for this particular portrait, I can quite happily use a remote trigger in my hand. I'm only going to be shooting effectively from the waist up, and so I can just drop my hands down to my side and the trigger will be out of shot. It won't make any difference at all being in there. So that's the camera setup. The next thing that most people have trouble with self-portraits is actually focusing the camera on themselves. Let me show you how I do it, a useful little trick for doing this. And all you need to be able to do it is a spare light stand, like the one I have here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place the light stand approximately, or in the position where I'm going to stand. I'm then going to raise the stand until the height of it matches my height. So we have something round about there for me. So I know that's my height and that's going to be the position where I'm going to stand. I'm going to mark that position on the floor with a little bit of tape. And I put it directly under the middle of the stand. So that's the exact position where the stand is. Having done that, I can now come over to the camera. I can focus on the light stand. Once the camera's focused on it, I put it into manual focusing mode, take off the autofocus. That means that the focus isn't going to change from what I've set now to the point when I take the shot. So I've got the position marked, I've got the light stand in place. So all that remains to do now is for me to stand exactly where the mark is on the floor. I can move the light stand out of shot, take the trigger, that's the position where I metered the light. I'm going to do the first shot of me looking directly into the camera. Shot 1. I'm going to do a pure profile shot, so I'm going to look straight that way, the light's coming in at the side. Shot 2, and that's the 2 shots that I need to make the caricature portrait. So I'll take the lights down, set up the PC, and I'll explain what we do from there. Welcome back. I've got my PC powered up, I've got Adobe Photoshop loaded and running. I'm now going to show you how we combine the 2 images that we took earlier into a caricature portrait. I've loaded both the images into Photoshop, and at the moment they're both here, as you can see, as separate tabs. I'm going to take the profile version and I'm going to drag that image onto the looking forward image. So the way we do that, we take the move tool, we grab the layer and drag it onto the tab where we want it. As we hover the mouse over the tab, that tab opens, move the mouse back over there. If I hold the shift key down, that will center the image. So I've got both images, one on top of the other. The next thing I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to change the opacity of the images, of the top layer, down to about 50%. The reason for doing that is so that I can see one layer over the other to align the images for the effect that we're trying to create. So I've aligned that. I'm going to zoom in slightly on the face because that's where I need to concentrate to do the aligning. So that should be fine. I've got the move tool still selected. I'm now going to move the top layer, which is the profile, and I'm going to try and align it so that my nose and mouth line up. And the thing I'm trying very hard to avoid is making sure that my nostril on the layer below doesn't come over the top of the layer above. So if you can see just here, the edge of the nose doesn't intersect with my left nostril, right nostril as you look at it. And the mouth lines up, the line of the mouth and the lips line up. The two eyes line up as well, as does the hairline. So that's now in the right place. Don't worry if you don't get it spot on the first go, we can adjust it later, and chances are we probably will have to. So we've got that lined up, change the opacity back to 100%. I'm now going to change the blend layer. As you can see here, it's currently set to normal. I'm going to change it to lighten. What lighten does is it makes sure that the lightest area from each image is what shows through. This is the reason why I was keen to make sure that the background was pure white behind me when we shot the images. It just means I can easily separate and join the two images together. As you can see, it's a pretty good version of the caricature portrait with just that. But let's improve it. Let's go for the full effect. And what we're going to do for that is we're going to take we're going to create a layer mask on layer 1, on the top layer. I'm going to make sure that my brush colour over here is set to black. I'm going to choose a brush. Now the size I want a very soft brush, hardness 0, and not a huge size, about 80 pixels works nicely for this. You can see from the size of the brush against the image the sort of size that you're looking for. Once I've got that, I make sure that the mask is selected, and I can simply start painting black onto the mask, which allows the layer below to start to show through. Now immediately as I start doing that, you will see an obvious problem. The brightness of the two layers don't quite match up. Now it's not a big issue, but we do need to try and get them as close as we can. And the way to do that, select the background layer, go to Image, Adjustments, Curves, and we're going to modify that layer using the Curves tool to just lighten it. So I'm picking up a point about here and just bringing it up slightly until the difference between the two layers isn't quite as obvious as it was before. Just play around with it a little. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means for the effect to work. And you can still see a little bit of a difference there. Bring that out. That's not too bad. So I'm going to go with that. So, okay. Now I make sure that I've got the adjustment mask layer selected, and I can now just carry on painting in all the way around my face on there. And as you can see, I don't have to be terribly accurate about this, and it very easily just sort of fills in the details. And because I've more or less matched the colours on both layers, then the two layers where I don't paint in on the mask so more or less match each other. And so that's not bad at all. I'm happy with that. Next stage is I want to crop that down. So take our crop tool, I'll choose a suitable crop at about there. And the final thing that you might want to do on this, now if you're doing this in Photoshop, I would recommend you use an adjustment layer with curves and just pull in and just play around with that very slightly just to give it a little bit more contrast. Now that's how you would do it in Photoshop, full version. If you're using Photoshop Elements, then instead of using an adjustment layer as I have, I'll go back in the history, back to the point when I haven't got that. Go back to there. What I would do in this case, I would select layer, flatten the image, and then image, adjustments, curves, and do the same effect, but I'm now doing it directly onto the image, because I believe Photoshop Elements doesn't support adjustment layers. So there we have it, a caricature portrait created in Studio and in Photoshop. Thanks for watching this videocast from in Studio. Please stay tuned for more videocasts in the future. Thank you and goodbye.
This has been an in-studio video presentation by Ian M. Butterfield. All content and photographs are copyright Ian M. Butterfield and may not be reproduced without prior permission. For more information, including how to subscribe to this and other videos, please visit www.ians-studio.co.uk/videos. Thank you.